Another huge week in women's rugby, and as ever the WRP is coming at you. We have got Lions chat, we've got all the results from around the world, we've got a unique perspective from outside the inner circle, as it were, from England and British and Irish Lions hooker Brian Moore, the commentator and big advocate of the women's game. Crowdfunding for injuries, we've got news of rugby returning. I'm Johnny Hammond.
And I'm Rachel Burford.
And this is the Women's Rugby Pod. How are you, Burf? How's things? How's the calf?
Yeah, no, I'm really good, thank you. Feels really good. Rehab's going really well. I almost feel a bit of a fraud it's going that well. So, yeah, no, in a good place.
What I wanted to say, Burf, is that you got this injury and the sun's out and what have you. I mean, do you do a bit of rehab and then it's sort of pina coladas with your feet up in the garden, soaking up the rays? Or how does it work for a pro
like
rugby
that.
player on rehab?
Yeah, no, it's just like that, Johnny. Just, do a little bit of rehab. And then I reckon yesterday I did about 1,000 calf raises. Like, that's just one part of my day. And then when you're injured, it's one of the worst things because you have to do all the training as well. So you still got to do strength conditioning, you still got to do weights, you still got to do skill stuff, you still got to watch video, and then you've got this added session of rehab that you've got to do. So it definitely is not sit back, feet up. I think they make it so horrible so that you want to get out of it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, they're not silly. So I'm just some people kind of reasonably good with injury. Some people kind of have to be quite good with injury. I suspect Jack Willis is in that camp. But you're not one of those people. You're just so eager to get back out there. Is there a target date yet, or is that something you can share?
Yeah, no, I think like any player, as long as you've got a plan, then you can kind of focus on that. I think when you're unknown what your injury is or how long it's going to take, it's difficult to work towards that. But yeah, no, I'm looking to go around for maybe around 15 or 14. Not sure exactly what one that is.
20th of March is round 15. You are playing away at Bristol.
Yeah, no, that's too soon. So probably looking at, because there's going to be a break with the Six Nations maybe. So in and around that time. Magic.
But it's just a couple of things I wanted to pick up with you and just have a chat. Back to the British and Irish Lions. There's a development. A small one, but nonetheless a development.
Yeah, really significant development. I think it's so easy to say, we want this, we want to do that, and wouldn't this be great? But have we actually done the detail around it and looked into whether it's viable, sustainable, and how we can action it? And so I think it's a huge step forward for the British and Irish Lions. Like, I've been involved in a couple of conversations with Ben Cavery before about it, and they are dead keen to have some form of women's British and Irish Lions, and I think they're going about it the right way, if I'm honest. I think it's really good what they've done, and yeah, just looking forward to seeing what's next.
Yeah, basically Royal London, who are the official pension investment and life insurance partners of the Lions series, they've also become a principal partner of the Women's Lions programme and will fund a study to examine whether a Lions women's team could be formed. I agree with you. It's another step forward, but it feels like you're in that sort of really heavy, thick mud, or even treacle, where you're sort of almost leaving your welly behind. It's that kind of slow on this progress. Reaction on Twitter is very much, we can give you the study now. Yes, we all want it, but it's more than that, isn't it? It's whether it's commercially viable. We live in that kind of world. Where are the Lions going? Do they follow the men's programme in terms of obviously the men go to New Zealand, Australia, South Africa. South Africa aren't there at the moment. Lynn Cantwell's probably going to change all of that. Australia, seven's a good side, but again, probably not there. New Zealand, certainly. You look at North America, but England beat USA and Canada standing on their heads. Could you do a trip to France? Do a little tour around France? And then, I don't think we've even spoken about this before.
Yeah, no, I think that's the beauty of this, is that the Lions is rich in history, and it's not about completely changing anything, but it's just we don't have to follow suit. And I think we have to go at the moment where the standard of playing is, and whether that is in France, because we know what France are capable of, is probably between France and New Zealand at the moment. I mean, that's if we're looking at next year. Maybe if we're looking in the next cycle, then, perhaps Lynn Campbell has done enough there to be competitive. Or so it's same in Australia, they may be in a place where they are more competitive. But I think at the moment they would be the two only countries to really get a competitive game up and running against the British and Irish Lions side.
Yeah, and I think, as you say, the Lions is the pinnacle of the men's game in the United Kingdom and Ireland. But this is you're starting a book forever. It's going to be there in the annals of time forever. Got to start it in the right way, and therefore you don't quite get it up and running as quickly as possible. I think that's right. But you've got to start it correctly in the right vein, so that forevermore. Take the women's barbarians. Got all the right people involved, started in the right way, loads of buzz around it. Now everyone wants to be a barbarian as well. Did it perfectly. Social media, all the rest of it, club getting behind it. It's got to be the same for the women's British and Irish Lions, or Lionesses, in my opinion. Humbly. On slightly more sour news, Burf. Rugby community is having to come together again. Alicia Butchers, Bristol, and Daisy Hibbert-Jones of Sale Sharks are crowdfunding to cover the cost of their surgery after injury. Is worth noting the clubs have given some funds towards it, but of course there's two sides to every coin. Happy to be corrected or for Sale or Bristol to come on, what have you. But on paper, on the face of it, that's ridiculous in 2021, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I think on the face of it, they've had to put a post on Facebook to ask for money. So that is what it is. The clubs have clearly not funded the full operation or the full care. And this is all, like, for me, there's a flaw in what minimum standards are required at clubs. And players should be, and if they're not going to pay for it, they should be saying to their players, if you're going to play at our club, you've got to get yourself private medical insurance. Like, if we're not in a place where the club can fund it, we're not there right now, whatever. But you've got to say to your players, you need to have medical insurance, because so many things could happen. And this is a scenario. You could hurt your ankle, you need an operation, it's going to cost you $8,000. We aren't there. We aren't able to pay that. So there's got to be a look in whether the minimum standard is the clubs will cover all medical insurance, or the minimum standard is that any player that signs at a club, you've got to make sure that you've got private medical insurance.
I mean, I don't know the details of the minimum standards, but I would have thought player welfare and what have you. And again, it's a bit like we're just talking about the Lions, starting something up. Yeah, it's new, fresh league, new teams. That's got to be first on the list, hasn't it? I mean, you as a player, been around a couple of years, would you prefer to have less of a budget as a club and therefore personally, and the RFU said, well, look, you've got your, 40 players?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're all insured to this level, but you're only now going to get this. Is that a better way of doing it?
Yeah, I think you've got to put player welfare first. There's no point in having all the nice stuff if you can't even be on the pitch.
I couldn't agree more, and it's not looking after players, and we're not directing or pointing fingers at the club specifically, but actually just the formation and the funding of it. But we can do all the hashtags and all the podcasts and all the rest of it we like, but if you're not looking after your players in your top league, we're pushing water uphill, aren't we? Up a mountain.
Yeah, I mean, it's worrying. Like, we don't know all the detail, obviously, but the fact that, and just to add to this, like, Alicia plays for an international side.
Yeah, for Wales.
So but, are these the only ones? Probably not. So it's definitely, it's created a lot of exposure in the wrong way. And I would have thought, that maybe the RPA and also the RFU will be, looking into those minimum standard measures and making sure that, we talk about it all the time, player welfare is at the forefront. That's where you start. Anything that compromises that or anything that isn't aligned with that, then that's where you've got to start. That's got to be at the top of the list. And in this case, it doesn't look like that.
I mean, if only the league was sponsored by an insurance company.
I'm Sude, and you're listening to the Women's Rugby Pod.
Well, we like to do things slightly different here on the WRP, week of International Women's Day. Well, I just think it should be every day. But anyway, we're getting a different perspective today. Often, obviously, most, and quite rightly so, most of our guests are females. But today, a man who's a big advocate of the women's game, daughter plays rugby. He's a big man in the media, commentator for the BBC. He's got his own podcast. It's former England and British and Irish Lions hooker Brian Moore to give his perspective from outside the inner sanctum, as it were, from a men's perspective, broadcast perspective, former international player perspective. It's Brian Moore. It's a very, very good morning to Brian Moore. Brian, how are you in these strange and unsettling times? Everybody, your end fit and well?
As well as it can be, with 5 females in the house and me. I don't get to watch much of what I want or do anything I want, really, but it's as good as it can be. I mean, I really do feel for people who have struggled badly mentally and financially. It must be awful. Bearing all that in mind, I'm not one of these COVID idiots. I understand the reason for people wearing protective gear and so on. It's not really a hassle, is it? Look, the main thing, I mean, in a rugby point of view, I just hope we can come out of it relatively intact, internationally and club-wise, because that's not necessarily a given with everybody.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. We were just going to touch on, obviously, you're a keen advocate of the women's game. You've mentioned there living in a house of 5 women. I understand certainly one of your daughters plays rugby. Are you?
All 4 of them play.
Wow. Okay. Well, there you are. I stand corrected. So, are you knee deep in cleaning rugby boots Sunday afternoon, doing gum shields, cleaning the kit, watching?
Yeah. I thought I'd got rid of that. Yeah. No, look, I didn't put any pressure on any of them purposely. I never said a word because I didn't want to feel that them to feel that they had to, they asked to. They all enjoyed it. My eldest one is a loss to the game, actually. She's 5'11", and she is naturally strong. I'm not naturally strong, but she is. When she joined as an 8-year-old, from 8 to 11, in any training session, game or festival, no boy ever took the ball off her. She's just too strong.
Wow.
She went to Moles and just ripped the things. She got told off by a referee who said she was showing feminist aggression when she hurled someone to the floor. It was just it was a wrong turn of phrase as well. Sort of, if you think about it, wasn't it? No, they really enjoy it, and long may it continue. The more women girls play, the better the game will be. The better the long-term prospects of the men's game are, the better chance you've got of recruiting people, the better chance you've got of countering these allegations of inherent unsafeness and concussion and so on. I just can't see. There is no downside to it. It's not just because it's the right thing to do, which it is. It's the right thing economically. It's the right thing socially. It's the right thing for rugby.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And that's the kind of message that we've been beating the drum since we started this podcast. It's not just a moral thing. Actually, it's, as you say, the correct thing to do. I know. I mean, I listen to lots of other podcasts. I know Matt Dawson has expressed his sort of fears and concerns about his children playing rugby. Do you have any of those in light of the sort of dementia and concussion stuff?
Look, because when you decide whether or not you or anyone else you're in charge of or responsible for undertakes an activity, unless you're dishonest, which some people are, what you do is you say, right, these are the risks and these are the benefits. And if those outweigh those, you don't do it, and if vice versa. What a lot of the advocates of, with flawed research, might I say, banning tackling and restricting the game, refuse to do, is they refuse to do that sum. They'll tell you what the risks are, but they won't say, right, let's put it in context. This is the same as your chances of winning the lottery or getting run over, going to school or whatever. By the way, it is 6th, 4th, 3rd in the list of dangerous sports, 4x. And by the way, when you take into account the antisocial agenda, the health agenda, the teamwork, the discipline, etc., then all those outweigh the contextual risk, which I consider. And if they don't, then you don't do it. But you do it, if you're going to do it, you do it honestly, and they're not being honest.
What's your relationship with the women's game, Brian? Outside of your daughters playing the game, we just put it back to just specifically the women's game.
My relationship goes back to coaching or helping, coaching on a restricted basis. The England forwards in 1991, just before their first World Cup, the one that was backed by the four girls, including Sue Dorrington, who is the scariest person I've ever met. I tell you, not many people intimidate me, but Sue did. So no, it goes back to 1991. And you know what? I just got involved because they asked me, and I thought, well, if people wanted to learn, then fine. I don't care whether they're male, female. And you know what? It's much better because women aren't smart asses. They don't think they know everything before you say things to them. You don't see the mist going over when which you do with male players. And I've seen the game grow. I've seen it develop, market. I've seen the skill levels go. What women's rugby needs now is this. It needs a coordinator, someone like me, to be able to go around to 50, 60-year-old men who are the people who run rugby clubs and make the case for women's rugby in the right way. Because if they're not going to change, if they're not well disposed to women's rugby, they're not going to listen to a woman. I have got far more chance as a British line and an England international and a lawyer and blah, 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 going along to them and making that case. And then from there, in each area, say take London, southwest London, or it can be a town, you need a person who takes responsibility to go to all the mini rugby sections and say, how many girls have you got? Right, when these girls get to 11, which of you clubs are going to run the 13s, 15s, 18s and women's teams? So they know exactly where to go. So it's near. And so when they're going to go to play against the followers, they don't have to travel 50 miles to get a fixture and so on. Because my 19-year-old now, she simply stopped playing because the next women's team girls' team was too far away. And then she went on to be, England under-16 netball pathway, Great Britain rowing pathway. She was a phenomenal talent, and she would have been a good player. But lost, and now she's an art student and being feckless and fretting about colours. So it's all gone. So it needs that. And then when you've got that solidified, then the moment women's rugby and girls' rugby gets onto under 12s, 13s, 14s, 15s, like the boys, the game will surge again. In fact, far more than it did, in the original league. But it's incremental. You've got to get things right at the time. But I think it's absolutely paramount that we get those steps nailed and in now, and then work on the other. And it's not easy because it's going to require a little bit of money and it's going to require a lot of volunteering.
Brian, you mentioned there, look, you're hired. From my point of view, that would be incredible. And I think that one of the questions I wanted to ask about for you is, what role do men play within this in the growth of the game?
Well, if they're sensible, they ought to be self-interested. Just take, for example, my old boys, Old Crossings. It's a lovely old schoolboy association. It's open. But, it used to run 4 teams. Now it runs 2. They got the minis stuff wrong. Someone came in, mate of mine, who I played with, he became chairman. They've now got a thriving mini section, 13s, 15s, 18s, and women's team. He said to me, transform the club. Because all the people I know are 50, 60, 70. You know, because that's what happens to us. People have got to understand. Kids are not like, you know, it's very easy to think, everyone thinks like me. They don't. My children don't think like me. I'm having to learn how they think. You know, that no longer do people want to spend. I was quite happy, and I loved it, spending all day Saturday, all night, playing rugby, getting drunk, singing songs, blah, 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 you know, doing the old things. People don't necessarily want to do that anymore. That's not the way they do things. Economically, you used to be able to have one parent working and be able to have a house. Now, in the southeast of England, you can't do that anymore, an ordinary person. You've got to have two people working to have any chance at all. And therefore, lots of households have two parents working. And therefore, it's not easy for the man or the woman to say, right, love, I'm off today, I'm off on Saturday, all day and all night. Because the other one says, hold on a minute, I work full-time as well. Why I'm not looking after the kids all day? You do your share. So people, you know, this is just an economic imperative, in the southeast at least, where people can't afford to, even if they wanted to, you just spend all day and all night. So, you know, clubs need to look at these things, and unfortunately, like I said, a lot of these clubs are run by volunteers. This is the difficulty, who've put their heart and soul in, but they are 50, 60, 70, because they've got the time to do it, and so on and so on. And they have the attitudes that come with that. Men, if they're sensible, and if they're honest, and having enough humility, ought to understand that the future of their game is in the hands, or should be underpinned by women and girls. Because you are not going to get any more boys playing rugby on a Saturday morning, on a Sunday morning, because you've got football, the sport which has monstrous amounts of money, has all the superheroes. People know if you have a 3-year contract in the Premier League, you're made for life. Why are you going to play rugby against that when you get bashed about and so on and so on and so on? So, you know, we're at a point with boys and men where even if you had an extra 10 million, it would make a marginal dent. The girls' and women's game is completely open. Football has stolen the march because it is football, but it's still there. And the USP about rugby union, about it being a game for all shapes and sizes, that is, having 4 girls, that is as much, if not more, applicable to body image, to, you know, to looking at athletic figures, beach bodies, and the models. You know, that is even more appropriate to girls, I think, to have those, you know, those things. And so it's an all-round thing. And as I say, the only thing that's stopping this is reluctance or prejudice on behalf of some people, lack of resources, and probably a lack of coordination. But I genuinely believe the game's future is there, because if you look at the participation numbers absent of girls and women, they've gone down. Not hugely, but they've gone down, and that shows, you know, where it will go if we don't do something about it.
So, if we've got a slightly blank canvas, which is kind of part of your theme there with women's rugby, because it is in its infancy. So the Six Nations, that's a couple of weeks away, standing alone from the men's tournament. How excited are you about that? Okay, slightly changed the format, which hasn't gone down particularly well with most of the players, I think it's fair to say.
Well, look, the format should go back.
Yeah,
it was
of course.
Going to be in restricted times of the World Cup. Now it's not there. You know, you can afford to do it properly. Look, I mean, it's a risk because it is a well-known and well-worked and successful model to have women's tournaments under the umbrella of a tournament like Wimbledon. You know, men's tennis, whatever. I'm sorry, but the facts are undoubtable. You know, it brings in a lot more money, but the women's tennis gets equal ranking because it's the same thing. The Paralympics were the Olympics, same thing. And I thought the model had worked well with women's rugby, and I just have this concern. I want it to work. I want there to be a commercial aspect for it. I want there to be the crowds there. And what I don't know is the extent to which it benefited from the umbrella bit and say, for example, it being at Stoop or after the game at Twickenham and how many people stayed on, if you can replicate the crowds at Sandy Park and Doncaster and they're full, absolutely great. We will see. I mean, I suppose you have to take this leap at some point, and my fingers are just crossed that that it's the right move.
And in terms of you as a broadcaster, obviously for many years, why don't you think broadcasters are willing to jump in? I mean, the autumn games with England and France went to the BBC and brilliant and some really good numbers, but that was that wasn't a broadcast deal. It was because nobody else had it.
It's commercial, and commercial organisations. The terrible phrase "chicken and egg." You need the publicity to make it bigger, to make it commercially viable. They need to be commercially viable to give you the publicity to film it. And only if they see a clear pathway to the investment that they initially put in to it being commercially viable, will they sort of seed it down. So you've got that. The problem is also, therefore, is that if you're on satellite TV, and this is conclusively proved, your audience is about anywhere between a half and a tenth of free-to-air channels. It just is. So whilst you get the money, you don't get the exposure, and women's rugby needs the exposure even more so than the money at the moment. It needs that. I was talking to Maggie Alfonsi about this. Can you beat it if you don't see it? Well, probably not, actually. So you need both. But this is the problem when you're dealing with commercial institutions, because why would they do this? You need the BBC to do that. You need that. But I tell you what, people give. I read an article, criticising Loaded magazine, and I don't read it or whatever. We don't cover women's sport, and I said, hold on a minute. I've just done a trawl of 30 of the women's weekly magazines, which have a joint circulation of 8 million people a week. There was one sports article, which was a Horse of the Year family discount offer. Now, you can berate Loaded and whatever all they like, but they will say, this is a men's magazine, we cover sport, look over there, these magazines for women don't cover anything, and it's true. So you can't, 8 million readers, you need to convert the female population as well, because quite a lot of the girls I see on the mornings have been brought down by their dads. The reason you need more girls and women and then parents and so on to have gone through it, so that they can bring them down as well, and they can influence, and then they can demand of magazines. The magazines will say, I presume, we do lots of research and expensive research to what our consumers want, and they don't want this. So, how do you go around that? Because that is the biggest women's audience. If you can't make dents in converting that, it is very difficult to turn around to men and male magazines and other outlets to say, wait a minute, you're being unfair. Because they can easily say, well, women aren't interested. We know this because women's magazines and things like this don't carry them. So the attack or the campaign, the strategy needs to be broader than just saying you and you change your mind as blokes, stop being sexist, misogynist, and whatever. Although that might be true as well. And say to women and get women, writing into these magazines, pressuring them. The thing is, one of my mates from school just happens to be one of the sponsorship experts. Well, he's one of the best in the world, actually, or certainly in this country. And he says there's a massive market to sponsor women's stuff, but it's got to be the right product, and it's got to get the right exposure. So it's the coordination of this. Campaigning for magazines to carry that so that the sponsors will get exposure, so that it's all involved. As I say, it's not simple. You can't do, you can do one bit then the other, but you don't get the results that you will get if it's all there. It needs to be done in a coordinated way. But that takes money, it takes time, it takes volunteers. And at this moment, rugby's struggling to keep itself afloat in any guise in lots of places. So I just hope that the others know. But I come back to this point, and I'm not saying this because I'm because I'm, woke or anything, although people who use woke like that don't understand what it means. The fact is, it's the right thing to do. It's the future of the game. It's what will underpin the game.
What a great way to finish things off. Conscious of your time, Brian. I knew it would be a fascinating chat with you, and huge thanks for your time this morning. Some really interesting points there, and that's exactly what I wanted to be getting on, was a slightly different angle of looking at it. Someone who clearly understands the worth of women's rugby, and as you say, the right thing to do. So thank you very, very much for joining us on the WRP this morning. Are you commentating at the weekend?
I don't think I am. I'm just watching frustrated silence as England try to get to grips with France.
We will see. Brian, thank you so much. Enjoy the game of the weekend. Thank you so much for your thoughts this morning.
Take care, Rick. Listen, if you ever want anything else, just don't hesitate. No problems.
Top man.
Oh, legend. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
See you soon.
I'm Shani Williams, and you're listening to the Women's Rugby Pod.
News time. Burf, and massive news here in the UK for the amateur game.
Yep, Johnny, some brilliant news coming out from the RFU as the roadmap has come out. Return to grassroots rugby, ready for rugby and some contact training from the 29th of March, and they'll be looking at law-adapted games from the 26th of April. Definitely something that has put a lot of smiles on a lot of people's faces.
Huge news, have to say. Very, very excited for that. I'm sure people up and down the country will be as well. Let's just keep vigilant in the meantime. Some news coming out of World Rugby. They're paving the way for future leaders in the game with 12 new women's executive leadership scholars. This is now up to 49 since 2018. Anna Tuiketi from Fiji, Lana Sando Kemi from Papua New Guinea, Annabelle Kehoe and Megan Howard from Canada. Do you remember Megan? She was the Canada manager in 2014. Anyway, Abigail Unikwa from Zimbabwe, Perez Mukoko from Kenya, Dio Yenti Casante from Costa Rica, Natalia Diaz from Argentina, Hannah Shalnagova from the Czech Republic, Rebecca Davis from England, and friend of the pod, Iran's Nahad Barmajadi, and Sarah Abdelbaki from Syria. Congratulations to all of you. And that's really important, isn't it? We've spoken to lots of guests, and you and I have spoken about it's the fastest growing team sport in the world. So many women and girls flooding into the sport, but it's how we funnel that, how we capture that energy, that excitement, and that willingness to play the game. And steps like this can only be a positive thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's really vital. You know, if you want to drive change and implement programs and things like that, then you need leadership right at the top. So this initiative just allows, that acceleration again, and to have an environment where you can share resource, you can reach out to people, and you can learn quicker than perhaps you would on your own. We all know that. It's a really, really vital part of the piece. And so good to see the HSBC Sevens series is back for 2021. This will be kicking off for the women's in Marcoussis on the 15th and 16th of May, and on the 22nd and 23rd of May. Can't wait for that to get up and running again. I've certainly missed the Sevens series. Yeah,
then the men's event in Canada in September, London. That again is the men's, Singapore as well as in October. Hong Kong, which is a joint event, men and women's, 5th to the 7th of November. Dubai, Emirates Sevens, men and women's again. That's 3rd, 4th of December. And then Cape Town again, another joint venture with the men and women, 10th to the 12th of December down in SA. Over to France. Before we get stuck into the English results from the weekend. Elite 1 Feminine. First round of those playoff pool stages. Remember, there's a little bit of controversy with the teams getting in there. Anyway, Pool 1, Blagnac beat Lens 26-7. In Pool 2, Stade Bordelais missed out by a single point to AS Bayonnais. Stade Toulousien beat ASM Roumanet 36-27. Next week, Lyon against Stade Rennais, and Montpellier, reigning champions, against Blagnac. ASM Romagny against Stade Bordelais, and AS Bayonnaise mayonnaise against the ketchup people. AS Bayonnaise against Stade Toulousien finishes off the round. And it was another intriguing week in the Premier 15s. Massive result. In fact, the 7th in a row for this new side, Exeter Chiefs. Beat Wasps 31-29 at Wasps.
Yeah, I can imagine Giselle will not be happy, considering the half-time score was 7-22, I believe. So for Exeter Chiefs to turn that around and to score on the death is unbelievable. I mean, that side is definitely, it's a habit to win, and they've got that at the moment. And it's been an interesting couple of weeks for Wasps, narrowly losing out to Harlequins, then they beat Saracens, then they just lose out this weekend, having beaten Exeter Chief quite comfortably before. But it makes it pretty exciting, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And 1-0 to JH on the predictions from last week. Oh, we must just mention McKinley Hunt, actually, hat-trick for Exeter, and Gabby Cantorna with a 100% kicking record, including the penalty right at the end. Saracens 53, Bears 7. May Campbell can't keep away from the try line.
Oh, she's got such a low centre of gravity. Try and tackle her and she just slips through. So, impressive stats again. Another hat-trick for the girl.
Harlequins without Totem Pole Burford 28, Gloucester Hartbury 15. First thing probably to say is we just wish Mo Hunt all the very, very best. Yeah, just dropped a little text yesterday. Still yet to have a scan, but we just wish her all the best. Horrible looking injury. Never like to see any rugby player going off the field on a stretcher. But anyway, a good win.
Yeah, it was a solid win. I think, Gloucester Hartbury certainly tested Harlequins a lot of the time. They put them under a lot of pressure. But Harlequins found a way, and, a couple of brilliant standout tries, which both of them actually made try of the week, so get voting. Jess Breach doing what she does so well. Such an elusive, balanced runner. Again, on the outside, zippy. Managed to go pretty much the full length. She'll think it's the full length. But I have to say, Amy Cocaine's try was unbelievable. She read the defensive play really well, got an intercept, then, little sprint through for about 10 metres, thought, you know what, I'm going to get tackled here, put boot to ball, little lovely soft rubber towards the try line, manages to bully the breakdown. That's what she's good at. Pick the ball up and dot it over. It was unbelievable from the hooker. Yeah,
sensational. And do you know what? Obviously, I have a look at all the team sheets on a Friday when it's all announced. And from, say, 12 months ago or last season, give or take a bit of COVID, it's a very, very different looking side on paper. Now, you've got some injuries and various bits and pieces. But actually, it's a very different looking Harlequin side. You can't select it on a Wednesday knowing what the team is going to be. And quite a few youngsters in there. So I was quite impressed by that result. DMP Durham Sharks once again nailed 62. The Loughborough Lightning put on them. A third hat-trick of the weekend came from Olivia Jones. As predicted.
Yeah, I think, are we seeing an improvement from Durham Sharks? I'm not sure.
Solution then, or we just got to give it time?
I think, of course,
well, we have to.
Time,
yeah.
But I think it comes back to that recruitment. They need, a couple of, we always talk about the spine of teams. They need some really key decision makers. And you look at like the likes of South Shark. I know we'll talk about their result in a moment, but having someone like just one player like Katie Daly-McLean can change the entire side. They need a couple of players like that just to start getting on the right direction, to be able to control and direct the team. Especially, so many teams now in this league are so difficult to play against. And so to be able to break them down, even in the smallest areas, you're going to need some really experienced key players. And I think that's just where they're slightly lacking. And it's a shame, because I think that the option maybe of having some of the Scottish players, but obviously with all the borders closed. So I think there's been plans for that, but that's definitely an area that I would say would need to be looked at.
And as you say, that Sharks result, they went down at six ways, 31 points to 21 to the Worcester Warriors. Yeah, early in the season, Sale had beaten Worcester, hadn't they? So revenge for that result. Sale were leading 21-12 at half-time. So fair play, good comeback from Worcester Warriors.
Yeah, no, I think that's been a long time coming, that result, hasn't it? We've seen glimpses of Worcester Warrior playing really well in patches, and I think, obviously things came together for them at the weekend. But yeah, really impressive, second half tries from Taz Bricknell, Medway girl of mine, Brooke Bradley, and I don't know if you saw it, but brilliant try from Jade Sheckles on the outside to get through and score over the line. So it's a really good result for Worcester Warriors, and I'm pleased that they've got the victory that they've probably, this would have been a target game for them.
Indeedy, it would have been. So that all means Saracens still leading the way, having played 13 on 57 points. Harlequins with their 14 games, 56 points. Loughborough Lightning, again 14, played 53 points. Then it's really tight. Wasson fourth, having played 13, 46 points. Exeter 14 games under their belt, 44 points. Then Gloucester Hartpury 30, Bristol Bears 22, Worcester 21, Sale 10, and DMP yet to trouble that table. Just two games at the weekend. Gloucester Hartpury against DMP Durham Sharks on Saturday, and Saracens against Sale Sharks on Sunday.
I'm Jill Burns, and you're listening to the wonderful Women's Rugby Pod.
Just to finish up then, Burf, some shout outs. Sarah Cox, really is a trailblazing woman, isn't she, in the middle of the park. Lady in possession of the P. She was at that massive upset in the championship, well, in English club rugby really, as the Cornish Pirates beat Saracens. Claire Daniels, the world's most capped test referee, was the assistant referee for that fixture as well.
And an impressive Yeovil Women's Rugby Club have been raising money by doing 5,000 burpees in one day. That literally makes me feel sick, the thought of that. That's amazing.
Yeah, what's a burpee? Craig Robinson of Warsaw gave him a shout out last week, and we said it, we couldn't quite believe that they were doing 10 million steps, aiming to raise £3,000 by running those steps during the month of March. They're already halfway. He's been in touch. You can find that fundraiser on Just Giving by searching Move in March for Warsaw Rugby Club. Just leaves for us to say, if you haven't already, do drop us a little rating, 5 stars or above. Subscribe, share the pod. We've got some exciting plans coming up with the Six Nations, possibilities of a live pod as well. And also, we must just mention, we've pulled together a brilliant new team. More content, going to be more over social media. YouTube channel has launched as well. We're going to be coming at you visually as well as audio as from next week. So yeah, some really exciting things happening for the WRP. Thank you to those people who have jumped on board with us. Thank you to you, Burf. Thank you to Brian Moore. Interesting to get his perspective. He's a forthright chap, and I think it's quite healthy to have someone who's not in the middle of the trees, but actually looking in.
Yeah, no, it's really good to have him on, have a different perspective. Like you said, he's a big advocate of the women's game, so it's great to get his input this week on the pod.
Next week, another big name from the women's rugby world coming at you. In the meantime, enjoy the sunshine, enjoy school, enjoy the kids being back at school, and continue your recovery well, Burf.
Cheers, Johnny. Until next time.